The question is that this House do now adjourn, and I come to Apsana Begum on domestic abuse and public life. Apsana Begum.
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, to make politics truly responsive to the needs of survivors of domestic abuse, to address the failures that have let them down time and time again, the voices of survivors need to be heard and understood in the place where our country's laws are being made. The Minister herself, as a survivor of domestic abuse and violence, is a testament to the fact that the voices of lived experience are desperately needed in this place. Yet the barriers to that can feel enormous. The cost of entering and staying in politics can mean that survivors are locked out or pushed out of political participation. When we know that the stigma, the structural and systemic bias against us, the endless complaints and investigation processes, the use of the courts and the law to threaten and silence us, what a survivor has to endure feels insurmountable. The Westminster Forum for Democracy have said, democratic institutions that tolerate the exclusion of women cannot credibly claim to represent them. Indeed, I know survivors who are already in public life who have chosen not to come forward or to report the abuse they have faced because of the position of power that their perpetrator is in. This is important, Madam Deputy Speaker, because politics is about power. Politics and abuse can so often be closely correlated, not least as we have seen through the revelations on the horrific crimes of Jeffrey Epstein and his connections to British political figures and institutions. The abuse does not end when a survivor leaves. Often it intensifies, as I know too well. The threats, intimidation, monitoring and manipulation can continue in social settings, in places like sports clubs, online and offline, and yes, in workplaces, political party settings, and generally all across public life. In my experience and the experience of survivors I've spoken to, post-separation harassment is shockingly pervasive. I want to illustrate this, firstly, through a story of a counsellor who informed me that she has endured post-separation harassment from an ex-partner, their family and his associates during the local elections on truly staggering levels. Hundreds of abusive messages shared during the campaign on public forums, including personal and private information, putting her at risk. While I will not be able to relate the full extent of the police failings in her case, it is shocking that no protections have yet been put in place to safely allow her to conduct her public duties despite the introduction of Operation Ford. How is she supposed to attend full council meetings when her ex-partner may turn up there? What about her prospects of being able to safely stand and participate in future elections? Tragically, she said, "I'm just at the point now where I don't think I want to stand again." This situation is all too familiar to me. But why should we be the ones to leave? As I have explained to the House previously, when I first put myself forward to be Labour's parliamentary candidate for Poplar and Limehouse, the harassment I faced intensified. My ex-husband told people he was angry that I hadn't asked his permission to stand. He threatened to expose me to the community, knowing that he had intimate details about my medical history and pictures of me without my hijab on. Threats were made to my campaign team members about telling the press stories about me, and they were told that people should make me stand down or else. And at the time, my ex-husband was a sitting Labour councillor. He was then, as I understand even now, well connected in local political groupings and to a small clique within my local Labour Party. Now, 2 years after my election in 2019, I was made to endure a vexatious 8-day trial of criminal charges as a result of a complaint made by my ex-husband's brother-in-law that I was completely cleared of, but that which I feel continues to haunt me and perhaps will for the rest of my life. Why? Because even after he was expelled from the Labour Party for his treatment of me, he stood against me in the general election in 2024 with the stated aim of wishing to set the record straight. Indeed, I found out through a press outlet less than 20 minutes before the legal nominations deadline closed that he was standing. Just 20 minutes to decide whether I should continue to embark on my re-election campaign with the prospect of continuing to be in public life, knowing that the harassment had rolled on from party and court processes now into an electoral one. I just want to highlight to the House just what this means in practice. I was unable to attend some hustings and had to seek advice as to whether refusing to stand next to him at the election count would violate his legal rights as a candidate. I'd have to leave polling stations immediately where he would be tipped off about where I was. I had to stop campaigning early on the day because the threat just couldn't be managed. And there does appear to be little or no framework on how to manage the situation overall because he was already confirmed as a parliamentary candidate, or even to protect my democratic rights and indeed provide me with safety as a candidate. I feel a tremendous duty to survivors, and I feel compelled to keep speaking out about these experiences and accordingly to do something about this, because what happened to me must never happen to anyone again. Madam Deputy Speaker, I have long been campaigning for better protections in the workplace for survivors of domestic abuse, and I have also been campaigning on a cross-party basis for new duties to be placed on all political parties to better support candidates and representatives who are survivors of domestic abuse so that they are not exposed to further harassment in their roles. Because abuse is not always direct, Madam Deputy Speaker. Survivors can experience threats made against third parties who can be intimidated or manipulated into engaging in behaviours desired by the perpetrator. These are forms of indirect abuse, as I've come to understand through the ongoing support of my independent domestic violence advocate. I know from my experiences of my ex-husband's associates, including that small clique who are still active within my local party, that the abuse can persist even when a perpetrator themselves is not present. With reports being made that my party is about to commence on a new reselection process, I still have not been told if or how the party will prevent those people from overseeing another process. In the years since the tragic and senseless murder of Joe Cox 10 years ago this month, Madam Deputy Speaker, numerous initiatives have been launched to tackle abuse and violence against representatives, campaigners and candidates. We know that women and black and minority ethnic women, most of all, face staggering levels of abuse online and offline. From threats of sexual violence to physical assaults, it is still a terrifying time to run for election as a woman. 69% of women polled cite abuse or harassment as a key reason for not pursuing a career in politics. And for a survivor, of course, it is even more difficult to consider. The representation of the People Bill returning to the House gives us the opportunity to tackle the barriers locking survivors out of our political system. I am glad to see Clause 32 increasing the timescale for anonymous voter registration, crucial for ensuring that survivors are able to participate in elections as voters. But what about participating as candidates? It is for that reason that I've tabled 2 amendments to this bill to address the gaps in protections under electoral law regarding domestic abuse. The Schedule 9 offences for which disqualification orders must include behaviours amounting to domestic abuse, and when charging and conviction rates for domestic abuse-related offences remain so low compared to the full scale of domestic abuse itself, I feel it is also necessary for courts to issue disqualification orders when granting protection orders. These amendments are supported by Elect Her and the Joe Cox Foundation, and I hope that the government will consider them fully as to encourage more survivors to participate in our politics and in our elections. Madam Deputy Speaker, there is no question about the need to make sure that survivors can feel secure and confident in standing for election. There are urgent measures that political parties, that government, and that the police must take to make this possible. I am sure that to the fullest possible extent, the Minister will be looking to deliver on the promises of the government's VOG strategy. The measure of that strategy's success will be whether it tackles the horrifying statistic that only 1 in 5 victims and survivors report their abuse. And how we enable victims and survivors to come forward is by tackling the systems which can be used to manipulate and silence them and prevent their voices from being heard. Political parties, including our own, must truly assess how well they do this themselves internally. We have a duty to make inclusive, democratic and safe environments possible for everyone to participate in, and it saddens me deeply to be in a position where I'm prevented from being able to participate fully in public life. I still have to risk assess every event and every meeting, and I cannot participate if the risks cannot be mitigated. And while I have spoken from my own experience today, I know that my experience is actually far from unique. I have been contacted by women and survivors from all across the country for whom I am determined to work for a society where survivors feel confident that they will be believed, listened to and treated supportively. This country must become one where survivors are not thwarted by ongoing harassment and abuse, including if they choose to enter public life, as surely should be their right.
Yes.